Ambassador Elena Reyes stared at the official notice on her datapad, reading it for the third time. Her hand trembled slightly as the meaning of the words sank in. "This can't be right," she whispered to her empty office on Nexus Station. 3. Years after humans had made first contact with the Galactic community, their application for associate membership in the Galactic Council was now on indefinite hold. The reason given made Elena's blood boil. Humanity had been classified as war-fearing primitives. Elena set the datapad down on her desk and walked to the large view screen that showed Earth, a beautiful blue marble hanging in the darkness of space. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of 7 billion lives resting on her shoulders. The door to her office slid open with a soft hiss. Her assistant, James Chen, entered with another datapad in hand and a worried look on his face. "You've seen the notice?" he asked. Elena nodded. "Yes. Apparently humans are too obsessed with war to join the civilized races of the galaxy." James handed her the second datapad. "The Valtraxian delegate just delivered this personally. It's the evidence package they've compiled against us. He seemed pleased." "I bet he was," Elena muttered, taking the device. The Valtraxians had been the most vocal opponents of human membership since first contact. They were one of the oldest species in the Council, with sleek blue skin and 4 arms that they loved to gesture with dramatically during speeches. Their lead diplomat, High Elder Zox, had never hidden his distaste for humans. Elena scrolled through the evidence package and felt her jaw tighten. They had compiled thousands of examples of human war fixation, everything from ancient epic, poems about battles to modern video games, military histories, sports competitions, and even children's games of tag. "They've been building this case since the day we arrived," she said. "Look at the detail here. They've analyzed our entertainment, our history books, our educational systems." "Is that the rules of chess?" James asked, looking over her shoulder. "Yes. Apparently strategic games are evidence of our violent nature," Elena said dryly, "along with boxing, action movies, and—" She scrolled further. "Paintball." James shook his head. "This is ridiculous. Every species must have conflicts in their history." "Maybe. But according to this, humans devote 34.2% of our creative output to scenarios involving warfare. That's apparently 78.6% higher than the galactic average." The full impact of what was happening began to dawn on her. This wasn't just a bureaucratic hurdle. This was an attempt to contain humanity before they could become a genuine interstellar power. "How long do we have to respond?" James asked. 72 hours. Elena set the datapad down and walked to the window again. 3 days to defend the entire history and nature of our species. That's impossible. We need more time to prepare a proper defense. That's exactly why they're only giving us 3 days. Elena turned, a new determination hardening her features. They want us to fail. This classification would put Earth under the guidance of more evolved species. Do you know what that means? Travel restrictions. Technology restrictions. Essentially, we'd become a protected planet. A zoo exhibit. James paled. They can't do that. They can if the full council votes to approve the adjudication committee's recommendation. Elena began pacing her office. "We need to understand exactly what we're up against. Get me everything we have on the previous cases of species classified as war-fearing primitives." Right away, James nodded and headed for the door. "And James," Elena called after him, "contact Dr. Lakshmi Patel from the xenoanthropology team. I want her perspective on this." Once alone, Elena returned to her desk and began methodically going through the evidence package again. The more she read, the more her initial shock turned into something else, a slow-burning righteous fury. 3 hours later, her office was transformed. Holographic displays filled the air around her desk, showing timelines of human history alongside the histories of other council races. Dr. Patel, a brilliant woman with quick eyes and quicker thoughts, stood beside Elena reviewing the data. "It's selective interpretation," Dr. Patel said, gesturing to one of the displays. Yes, humans have fought wars, but look at what followed each major conflict in our modern era. New international cooperation, peacekeeping organizations, treaties. They've conveniently left that part out, Elena agreed. The bigger question, Dr. Patel continued, is why now? Why push for this classification 3 years into our relationship with the galactic community? The door opened again as James returned with another team member, Marcus Okafor, the station's data analyst. I think I might have an answer to that, Marcus said, holding up a data crystal. I've been analyzing trade patterns since our arrival. Look at this. He inserted the crystal into Elena's desk, and a new set of charts appeared in the air. They showed steadily increasing lines representing trade agreements between Earth and various young spacefaring civilizations. We've been making friends, Marcus explained. Lots of them, especially with species that aren't full council members yet. The shipping contracts we've established with the Rendari alone have increased their economic growth by 23%. And the Valtraxians previously had a monopoly on Rendari shipping routes, James added. Elena studied the charts carefully. So this isn't about fear of human violence at all. It's about economics and influence. Always is, Dr. Patel said with a sigh. They're using our history of conflict as an excuse to limit our expansion because we're disrupting the established power balance. Elena stood still for a moment, thinking. Then she tapped a command into her desk console. I'm calling. An emergency meeting of our entire diplomatic team, 6 hours from now. I want everyone prepared with every scrap of information we have on council procedures, previous classification disputes, and especially data on extinct civilizations. Extinct civilizations? James asked, confused. Something has been bothering me about the council's approach to security, Elena explained. For an organization that claims to value peace above all else, they have remarkably little in the way of collective defense. It's almost as if they're hiding rather than deterring threats. She looked around at her team, her eyes bright with determination. They've given us 72 hours to respond to these charges. They expect us to be defensive, to argue that humans aren't as war-focused as they claim. But that's not what we're going to do. What are we going to do? Marcus asked. Elena's lips curved into a slight smile. We're going to change the conversation entirely. If they want to discuss humanity's approach to conflict, we'll gladly oblige them, but we'll do it on our terms. She turned back to the view of Earth, her home, suspended in the blackness of space. They've called us war-fearing as an insult, she said quietly. By the time I'm done, they'll understand why that might be the highest compliment they could have given us. The team exchanged glances, seeing something in their ambassador they hadn't seen before. In her eyes burned not just anger, but the focused intensity that had driven humanity to overcome every obstacle they had ever faced. The Galactic Council had no idea what was coming. Ambassador Elena Reyes stood alone at the center of the Grand Council chamber, her back straight and her face calm, despite the storm of emotions inside her. Above and around her, 5,000 seats rose in perfect circles, filled with delegates, representing over 300 different species from across the galaxy. The chamber itself was breathtaking, a massive dome with walls that seemed to shimmer between solid and transparent, sometimes showing the stars beyond, sometimes displaying information in glowing symbols. The air smelled faintly of something like cinnamon, probably some alien plant used to keep the atmosphere pleasant for the many different life forms present. Elena wore her formal diplomatic uniform, dark blue with the Earth emblem on the shoulder. She had chosen not to wear any ceremonial decorations or medals, though she had earned several during her career. This wasn't about her achievements. This was about humanity's right to join the galactic community as equals. The Adjudication Committee recognizes High Elder Zox of the Valtraxians, who will present the case regarding the species classification for humans, announced a metallic voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. From the front row of seats, a tall figure with blue skin and 4 arms rose gracefully. High Elder Zox wore elaborate robes that shimmered with threads of some material that caught the light like liquid silver. His face had no nose, just smooth skin with breathing slits, and his eyes were large and completely black. He moved to a platform that floated down to hover near Elena, but positioned slightly above her so he looked down on her. Elena recognized the psychological tactic and kept her face neutral. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," Zox began, his voice smooth and confident. "3 solar cycles ago, representatives of the species known as humans made contact with our outpost in their star system. Since then, we have carefully studied their civilization to determine their readiness to join our community." Holographic images appeared in the air around the chamber. Earth cities, military parades, movie scenes showing battles, sports competitions. "What we discovered was deeply troubling," Zox continued. "Humans devote 34.2% of their creative output to scenarios involving warfare. Their historical archives contain 78.6% more references to conflict than the galactic average." More images appeared. Children playing with toy soldiers, chessboards, video games showing space battles. Their educational systems require the study of past combat strategies. Even their recreational activities frequently simulate battle conditions. Zox's upper hands gestured expressively, while his lower hands remained clasped in what Elena recognized as a posture of grave concern. "We have never encountered a species so thoroughly conditioned to anticipate violence. The evidence suggests humans do not merely accept war, they actively prepare for it even in times of peace, indicating a deeply ingrained fear response that manifests as aggression." Elena remained still, watching Zox carefully. Her team had prepared her for this, but hearing humanity described this way, as if they were dangerous animals, made her jaw clench. She forced herself to relax. The images changed again, showing Earth's military bases, weapon systems, and training exercises. "Consider these images," Zox said. "Humans maintain massive standing armies even when not at war. They invest significant resources in weapons development. Their space exploration efforts began as competitions between rival political entities, driven by military concerns rather than scientific curiosity." A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Elena knew many of them had never interacted with humans directly and were forming their first impressions from Zox's carefully selected examples. From their earliest recorded history to their current civilization stage, humans have engaged in constant warfare. Their most celebrated historical figures are often military leaders. Their most remembered historical events are battles and conflicts. Now Zox displayed quotes from human literature, from the Iliad to modern military science fiction, carefully selected passages that emphasized violence and conflict. "Even in imagining contact with other species," Zox said, his voice dropping dramatically, "humans frequently envision scenarios of war." The chamber fell silent as thousands of alien beings absorbed this characterization of humanity. Elena could feel their eyes on her, some curious, some fearful, some clearly hostile. "Based on our thorough analysis," Zox continued, "the adjudication committee recommends classifying humans as war-fearing primitives. This classification would require protective oversight of Earth by more evolved species, restrictions on human expansion beyond their home system, and careful monitoring of their technological development." Zox turned slightly to look directly at Elena for the first time. "This is not a punishment. It is for the safety of humans themselves, as well as the greater galactic community. A species so fixated on conflict requires guidance to overcome their fear-based aggression patterns before they can take their place among peaceful civilizations." He spread all 4 arms in what appeared to be a gesture of regret. "We have seen species like humans before. Without proper guidance, they typically self-destruct or cause significant harm to neighboring civilizations. This classification is an act of compassion." With that, Zox returned to his seat, leaving Elena standing alone in the center of the chamber. The holographic images remained, frozen scenes of human conflict surrounding her like accusations. "Ambassador Elena Reyes of Earth," the metallic voice announced. "You may now present your response to the committee's recommendation." Elena took a deep breath and looked around the chamber. Thousands of alien faces watched her, waiting to see how she would defend her species. She had spent the last 3 days preparing for this moment, working with her team to analyze not just the charges against humanity, but the deeper patterns in the Council's own history. She had planned to begin with calm, diplomatic language, to gently correct the mischaracterizations, and explain the context that Zox had deliberately omitted. That had been her original strategy. But standing here, surrounded by images selected to make her species look like violent savages, Elena felt that cold fury return. Not a blinding rage, but something focused and clear, something that cut through diplomatic niceties to the heart of what was happening. These beings thought they understood humans. They thought they could judge humanity based on carefully selected fragments of their history and culture. They presumed to decide humanity's place in the galaxy. Elena stepped forward, her movement deliberate and confident. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. Distinguished delegates of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of steel. I thank Elder Zox for his thorough presentation. She paused, her eyes scanning the chamber before delivering words that would be remembered across 1,000 worlds. It seems you have studied our history well, but understood it not at all. It seems you have studied our history well, but understood it not at all. Ambassador Elena Reyes's words hung in the air of the Grand Council chamber. The thousands of delegates from across the galaxy shifted in their seats. Many leaned forward, suddenly more interested in this human's response. Elena stepped forward, her movements deliberate. She did not raise her voice, forcing the delegates to pay close attention. Yes, we humans think about war. We write about it, study it, and prepare for it. She nodded, acknowledging this fact. But not because we fear war itself. We fear the cost of being unprepared. She gestured toward the frozen holographic images that Zox had left floating around the chamber. Scenes of human conflicts and military preparations. You call this a primitive fixation, Elena continued, her voice growing stronger. I call it wisdom earned through blood. With a small device she pulled from her pocket, Elena took control of the chamber's display system. The images around her changed. Now, instead of battles and weapons, they showed what came after wars, memorials to the fallen, peace treaties being signed, former enemies working together, international cooperation. For every war in our history, I can show you the institutions we built to prevent the next one, Elena said. For every weapon we created, I can show you the medicine, the communications technology, the transportation systems that emerged alongside it. She walked slowly in a circle, making eye contact with delegates from different sections of the chamber. Hi. Elder Zox spoke of percentages and statistics. He said humans devote 34.2% of our creative output to scenarios involving warfare. Elena nodded. An impressive figure, very precise. But while you were busy counting our war stories, did you count our peace treaties? New images appeared. The signing of the United Nations Charter, the Geneva Conventions, international aid, workers helping disaster victims. Did you measure the resources we devote to diplomacy? Did you calculate how many of our greatest innovations came from the desire to connect rather than divide? Elena tapped her device again. Now the displays showed the global internet, vaccines being distributed to children, international space stations, and humanitarian missions. The Valtraxian presentation was thorough, Elena acknowledged, but curiously selective. For instance, Elder Zox mentioned that our space exploration began as a competition between rival nations. True, but he failed to mention what it became. The images changed to show international space cooperation, joint missions between former enemy nations, and scientific discoveries made possible by human collaboration in space. What Elder Zox calls a fixation on conflict is actually humanity's greatest strength, our ability to learn from our mistakes. Yes, we study war. We study it because we have learned its cost. We prepare for it not because we desire it, but because we know the price of ignorance. Elena's face grew serious. Thousands of years ago, a human philosopher named Vegetius wrote, "If you want peace, prepare for war." Many in this chamber might see that as evidence of human aggression, but those with wisdom will recognize it as the foundation of true security. She paused, looking directly at Zox. You've presented a version of humanity that exists only in carefully edited fragments. You've counted the conflicts but ignored the cooperation that followed. You've measured our weapons but overlooked the institutions we built to prevent their use. A murmur ran through the chamber. Several delegates were nodding, while others leaned to whisper to their neighbors. The holographic displays continued to cycle through images of human peacekeeping, scientific achievements, and global cooperation. But there's something far more troubling about these proceedings, Elena continued, her voice dropping slightly, creating a sense of intimacy despite the vast chamber. You see, while preparing my response, my team has been analyzing the Council's own records, which we were granted access to upon beginning our membership application. She tapped her device once more. The displays now showed complex charts and data visualizations. These are statistics that the Council itself has collected. My team simply analyzed them in ways you apparently have not. The charts showed pattern recognition algorithms applied to galactic historical data. Complex but clearly showing something unusual. Regular spikes of activity followed by sudden drops. What troubled me most wasn't the selective presentation of human history, but the pattern we found in your own records. Elena looked around the chamber, making sure she had everyone's attention before continuing. You label us war-fearing as if this is a primitive trait to overcome. But fear, properly understood, is wisdom. Fear is what stops a child from touching a hot flame after being burned once. Fear, channeled correctly, becomes preparation. It becomes resilience. She swept her hand toward the data displays. And based on what we found in your own historical records, the galaxy could use a healthy dose of well-directed fear right now. High Elder Zox stood suddenly. Ambassador Reyes, you were granted time to respond to the classification recommendation, not to present new topics. Elena smiled slightly. I am responding directly to your recommendation, Elder Zox. You suggest that humanity's preoccupation with conflict makes us dangerous and unpredictable. I am explaining why that preoccupation exists, and why it may be precisely what the galaxy needs right now. The head of the Adjudication Committee, a tall, thin being with pale green skin, raised a long-fingered hand. Allow the human ambassador to continue, Elder Zox. I find this perspective interesting. Zox sat down, his forearms crossed in different combinations that Elena recognized as signs of frustration. Thank you, Elder Tal. Elena nodded to the committee head. As I was saying, humanity's approach to conflict isn't primitive. It's practical. We prepare for war precisely because we value peace so highly. She walked to the center of the chamber, again her voice growing stronger. You've judged us by counting our war stories but failed to understand their message. The human obsession with conflict narratives isn't celebration, it's education. We tell these stories to remember what happens when diplomacy fails, when cooperation breaks down, when we give in to our worst instincts. Elena's eyes swept the chamber. Our war stories aren't manuals for aggression, they're warnings. They're the collective wisdom of a species that has learned, time and again, that the price of peace is vigilance. The chamber had grown completely silent now. Every delegate was focused on the single human standing at the center of galactic power, challenging their assumptions with quiet confidence. You call us war-fearing primitives, Elena said, her voice carrying easily in the hushed chamber. But perhaps fear of war, real, informed fear based on hard experience, is exactly what a mature civilization should cultivate. She straightened her shoulders, looking directly at the Adjudication Committee. And perhaps, if you'll allow me to continue, I can show you why the galaxy might soon have cause to thank the stars that humans never forgot how to prepare for the worst while working for the best. The Grand Council chamber remained silent as Ambassador Elena Reyes moved toward the central data projection area. The thousands of delegates from hundreds of worlds watched with a mixture of curiosity and unease as she prepared to continue her defense of humanity. With your permission, Elena said, addressing the Adjudication Committee directly, I would like to share what my team discovered while analyzing the Council's historical records. Elder Tal, the green-skinned head of the committee, gave a slight nod. Proceed, Ambassador. Elena activated her data device. The holographic displays changed to show a complex timeline stretching back 20,000 years. Colored dots representing different civilizations appeared, moved, and sometimes vanished along this timeline. This is galactic history as recorded in your own archives, Elena explained. Each dot represents a spacefaring civilization that made contact with the Council or its predecessor organizations. She gestured and the display zoomed in on specific sections of the timeline. Notice anything unusual? Elena asked, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, forcing the entire chamber to lean in. Every 3 to 5 centuries, something happens. Emerging civilizations simply disappear. The display highlighted several instances where clusters of dots vanished from the timeline. Elena let the pattern speak for itself before continuing. Species that developed promisingly suddenly go silent. Their home systems later found devastated or abandoned. She looked up at the assembled delegates. This isn't a random pattern. This is systemic. Murmurs broke out across the chamber. Some delegates looked confused, others uncomfortable, and a few seemed deeply troubled. Ambassador, Elder Zox interrupted, rising from his seat. These are unrelated incidents spread across thousands of years. The suggestion of a pattern is speculative at best. Is it? Elena replied calmly. She tapped her device again. My team applied advanced pattern recognition algorithms to this data. The statistical likelihood of these extinctions being random is less than 1 in 10 billion. New displays appeared, showing complex mathematical formulas and probability calculations. Something, or someone has been systematically eliminating rising civilizations, Elena continued, and the Galactic Council's response seems to have been to teach surviving species to hide rather than to defend themselves. The chamber erupted in protests. Delegates shouted objections in dozens of languages, while others sat in stunned silence. Elder. Tal raised a hand and gradually the chamber quieted. These are serious allegations, Ambassador Reyes. What evidence supports your conclusion about the Council's response? Elena nodded, appreciating the direct question. Look at the Council's own policies, Elder Tal. After each wave of extinctions, what changed? She displayed a new set of data. Council regulations on technology sharing became more restrictive. Expansion policies became more conservative. Member species were encouraged to spread thinly among the stars rather than concentrate their populations. Elena walked slowly around the central area, making eye contact with delegates from different sections. You oldest races have survived because you learned to hide, she said, her voice clear and steady. You spread yourselves thin among the stars, maintained low profiles, and developed policies of non-intervention. You don't prepare for war not because you're enlightened, but because you're terrified. The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. No one spoke. No one moved. Ambassador, Elder Tal said finally, his voice strained. Even if such a pattern exists, which I am not conceding, what does this have to do with humanity's classification? Elena's expression softened slightly. Everything, Elder Tal. You've classified us as war-fearing primitives because we prepare for conflict, because we haven't forgotten how to fight, because we refuse to be caught unprepared. She gestured to the extinction data still displayed around the chamber. I suggest that's not a weakness to be corrected. It might be the greatest gift humanity could bring to the galactic community. Elena turned to face the wider chamber now. Humanity doesn't fear war. Her voice cut through the tense silence. We fear extinction. We fear subjugation. And unlike you, we refuse to hide from these fears. We confront them. We prepare for them. We overcome them. She looked directly at High Elder Zox. You call us war-fearing as an insult. We accept it as the highest compliment. A species that doesn't fear war enough to prepare for it is a species destined for extinction. Several delegates stood now, trying to speak at once. The chamber's translation system struggled to keep up with the sudden flood of questions and objections. An elderly delegate from one of the oldest council species, a Morrigan with silver scales and eyes that had seen millennia, slowly rose from her seat. The chamber gradually fell silent as she prepared to speak. "I am Elder Sashin of the Morrigan," she said, her voice crackling with age. "I have served on this council for 300 years. What the human ambassador has shown us is not unknown to some of us." Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. Elder Sashin continued. "The oldest among us have suspected a pattern, though we have never spoken of it openly." She fixed her ancient eyes on Elena. "How did your species, so new to galactic society, discover what we ourselves have only whispered about?" Elena smiled slightly. "Because we looked for it, Elder Sashin. Humans are pattern seekers by nature, but more importantly, we're survivors. When we see evidence of repeated extinction events, we don't look away. We don't pretend it isn't happening. We prepare." She turned back to the wider chamber. "You've spent thousands of years developing policies of avoidance and concealment. You've spread your populations thin, hoping that whatever causes these extinctions might miss some of you. You've restricted technology sharing and expansion, thinking that staying small and quiet might keep you safe." Elena's voice grew stronger. "But what if that strategy is reaching its limits? What if hiding isn't enough anymore? What if the next wave of extinctions is coming, and this time being quiet and dispersed won't save you?" The chamber was utterly silent now. Elena could almost feel the collective fear of thousands of beings who had never considered these questions, or who had deliberately avoided them. "This is why humanity's approach to conflict matters," Elena said into the silence. "This is why our war-fearing primitive nature might be exactly what the galaxy needs right now. Because whatever eliminated those civilizations in your records is still out there, and unless we stand together, unless we prepare together, history suggests it's only a matter of time before more of us join the silence." Elder Tall's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely audible. "What would you have us do, Ambassador Reyes? If what you suggest is true?" Elena looked at him directly, her eyes clear and determined. "Something you haven't done in thousands of years, Elder Tall. Stop hiding, start preparing, and recognize that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy might be that we never forgot how to fight back." The Grand Council chamber remained in stunned silence after Ambassador Elena Reyes's revelation. The extinction pattern she had uncovered from the Council's own records hung in the air as glowing data points, impossible to ignore. Thousands of delegates sat motionless, processing the implications of what they had just learned. High Elder Zox was the first to recover. He stood, his forearms moving in complex patterns that suggested both agitation and calculation. "The Council will need time to verify these patterns that the human delegation claims to have discovered," he announced. "I move that we suspend these proceedings for a standard cycle to allow for proper analysis." Elena stepped forward. "With respect, Elder Zox, we don't have time for delays. If my team's analysis is correct, we are already in the historical window, when another extinction event could occur." "All the more reason to proceed carefully," Zox countered. "Hasty actions based on unverified data could create unnecessary panic." Elder Tall raised a hand for silence. "Ambassador Reyes, what exactly are you proposing? You've shown us this pattern, but you have not yet offered any specific recommendations." Elena nodded and took a deep breath. The moment she had prepared, for it arrived. Everything now depended on how she presented humanity's position. "The Galactic Council has two paths forward," she began, her voice clear and strong. "First, you can approve Earth's application for associate membership, acknowledging that our perspective brings valuable diversity to your ranks." She paused, letting the tension build. "Or second." The chamber was completely silent, everyone focused on her next words. "Second, you can deny us. But know this, humanity will not accept protective oversight. We will not disarm. We will not limit our expansion. And should whatever threat you've been hiding from for millennia finally find us, we will face it standing, not kneeling." Murmurs broke out across the chamber. Some delegates appeared shocked by the directness of her statement. Others seemed impressed by her boldness. "Is this a threat, Ambassador?" Elder Zox asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Not at all, Elder Zox," Elena replied calmly. "It is simply a statement of fact. Humanity has never responded well to being controlled. History shows that clearly enough." She tapped her data device once more. New images appeared, showing ships of unfamiliar design docked at various stations. During the 3 years since first contact, Earth has been establishing independent diplomatic and trade relations with species across the galaxy, Elena explained, particularly with developing civilizations who, like us, have faced resistance from the Council. The displays showed faces of various species, some reptilian, some insectoid, others with forms barely comprehensible to human perception. All of them were species not represented among the Council's full members. Together, we formed what I now officially introduce as the Mutual Defense and Development Compact. Complete silence fell over the chamber. The implications were enormous. While the Council had been debating whether to accept humans as associate members, humanity had been quietly building its own network of alliances. 37 species have already joined, Elena continued. All of them were classified as too primitive, too aggressive, or too undeveloped by Council standards. All of them were denied full participation in galactic governance. Elder Tal leaned forward. Ambassador, forming military alliances without Council approval is what? Elena interrupted. Forbidden? By whose authority? The Compact members are not full Council members. They are sovereign species making sovereign decisions about their futures. She looked around the chamber. This is not a threat, Elena clarified. This is an invitation to stop hiding and start preparing. Because whatever eliminated those civilizations in your records is still out there. And unless we stand together, history suggests it's only a matter of time before more of us join the silence. A tall crystalline being rose from the mid-level of the chamber. I am Representative Quartz of the Lumidian Collective, it said, its voice creating harmonic tones that made the air vibrate. Our species was classified as technically immature 70 years ago. Despite our advances in quantum communications, we have since joined this compact. I can confirm that the human assessment of extinction patterns matches our own independent analysis. From another section, a hovering cloud of green particles formed into a roughly humanoid shape. The mist. Consciousness concurs, it said. We too have observed the pattern, but were told our conclusions were speculative when we presented them to the Council 50 years ago. One by one, representatives from species Elena hadn't even known were present began to speak up. Each confirmed part of her story, either about the extinction pattern or about the discrimination they had faced from the Council. High Elder Zox looked around the chamber, clearly alarmed by how quickly he was losing control of the situation. This is highly irregular, he protested. The human ambassador has clearly orchestrated this disruption to avoid proper classification procedures. Elder Sashin, the ancient Morrigan who had spoken earlier, slowly rose again. Perhaps, she said, her voice cracking with age. It is our procedures that need re-examination, not the humans. She turned her ancient eyes to Elena. You have presented a compelling case, Ambassador Reyes. But I must ask, what do you propose we actually do about this extinction threat? If it exists as you claim, it has defeated countless civilizations before us. Elena nodded respectfully to the elder. That is precisely why we need to change our approach, Elder Sashin. Previous civilizations faced this threat alone, or in small groups. What if we faced it united, not hiding in separate corners of the galaxy, but standing together with our combined knowledge and strength? She turned to address the entire chamber. The Mutual Defense and Development Compact is not meant to compete with the Council. Ideally, it would work alongside it. We're not asking you to abandon caution, just to balance it with preparation. Elena looked directly at the Adjudication Committee. The human classification as war-fearing primitives is technically correct. We do fear war. We fear it enough to prepare for it, and that preparation might be exactly what saves us all. The chamber erupted in voices, some supportive, some outraged, many simply confused. Elder Tal raised his hands for silence, which came slowly. This session has raised unprecedented questions, he said finally. The adjudication committee requires time to consider both the original classification issue and these larger concerns. Hiwa looked at Elena. Ambassador Reyes, your presentation has been illuminating. The committee will recess for 3 days to verify your data and consider your proposal. Elena nodded. Thank you, Elder Tal. But please remember, while the council deliberates, the clock may be ticking. If our analysis is correct, we cannot afford to waste time. As Elena turned to leave the chamber, dozens of delegates moved to intercept her. Some looked angry, but many more seemed eager to speak with her privately. Representatives from species she recognized as part of the compact gave her subtle gestures of support. Elder Sashin approached her slowly, her ancient form moving with difficulty. For 10,000 years, she whispered when she reached Elena. Some of us have watched these patterns and done nothing but hide. Perhaps it took a species as young and bold as yours to finally speak the truth aloud. Elena smiled slightly. Sometimes, fresh eyes see what others have learned to overlook, Elder. The ancient being nodded. The council will not change easily, human. But you have started something today that cannot be undone. Whether that leads to salvation or chaos remains to be seen. As Elena left the chamber, she knew that whatever the committee decided in 3 days, the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage not as supplicants seeking admission, but as a force demanding to be reckoned with. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, perhaps something ancient stirred, sensing the change. 3 weeks had passed since Ambassador Elena Reyes's dramatic confrontation with the Galactic Council. The corridors of Nexus Station buzzed with activity and tension. Diplomats from hundreds of species huddled in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. Everyone knew that today's council session would be historic. Elena stood before a large viewport in her quarters, looking out at the stars. She wore her formal diplomatic uniform, freshly pressed for the occasion. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of private meetings, data verification sessions, and tense negotiations. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal James Chen, her assistant. "It's time, Ambassador," he said. "The council is reconvening." Elena nodded and turned away from the stars. "How are the numbers looking?" "Better than we expected," James replied, falling into step beside her as they walked through the corridor. "At least 60% of the full council members have expressed private support for our position. The compact representatives are all present and ready." "And Zox?" Elena asked. James smiled slightly. "That's the biggest surprise. He's requested a private meeting with you before the session begins." Elena raised an eyebrow. "That's unexpected." They reached a small conference room near the Grand Council chamber. High Elder Zox waited inside, his 4 arms held in a formal posture of respectful greeting. "Ambassador Reyes," he said as she entered. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." Elena nodded politely. "Elder Zox, this is unexpected." The Valtraxian's face was difficult for humans to read, but his posture seemed less hostile than before. "The past 3 weeks have been illuminating," Zox said carefully. "The adjudication committee has verified your data. The extinction pattern is real. We've known it subconsciously for generations, but we've never confronted it directly." He paused, his 4 hands moving in complex patterns that Elena now recognized as signs of deep thought. "I have served on the council for 87 years, Zox continued. In all that time, I believed our cautious approach was the path of wisdom. I thought species like yours, with your direct confrontation of problems, were dangerous. And now?" Elena asked. "Now I wonder if we've made a terrible mistake," Zox admitted. "By teaching civilizations to hide rather than prepare, we may have perpetuated the very cycle we hoped to escape." Elena was careful not to show her surprise. "What are you proposing, Elder Zox?" "A compromise," he said. "One that honors both approaches. Caution has kept many species alive, but preparation, your human specialty, may be what finally breaks the cycle." The door chimed again, and Elder Tal entered along with Elder Sashin. "The council is ready," Tal announced. "Shall we proceed?" Together, The Grand Council chamber was more crowded than Elena had ever seen it. Not only were all 5,000 regular seats filled, but additional viewing platforms had been added to accommodate representatives from species not normally included in full council proceedings. The compact members were prominently positioned, in a special section, a visible sign of their new importance. Elder Tall took the central position, his green skin seeming paler than before. "This special session of the Galactic Council is now convened," he announced. 3 weeks ago, we recessed to verify data presented by the human ambassador regarding extinction patterns and to consider Earth's application for membership. He gestured to a large display showing the same extinction pattern Elena had presented, but now expanded with additional data points. The adjudication committee has confirmed the pattern identified by the human delegation. Tall continued. Furthermore, we have uncovered additional evidence that supports their conclusion. Something has indeed been systematically eliminating rising civilizations approximately every 3 to 5 centuries. Murmurs spread through the chamber, but they quickly died down as Elder Tall raised his hand. In light of this verification, the committee has reconsidered its recommendation regarding humanity's classification. We withdraw the war-fearing primitives designation. Applause broke out from the compact section. Elena remained composed, waiting for the full announcement. Instead, Tall continued, we propose a new classification. Pragmatic preparedness. This designation acknowledges humanity's unique approach to security as a potential asset rather than a liability. Elder Zox rose and moved to stand beside Tall. Furthermore, he said, I personally move that Earth be admitted not as an associate member, but as a full council member with immediate effect. The chamber erupted in surprised exclamations. Full membership typically took decades to achieve after associate status. The human perspective, Zox continued once the noise had subsided, while initially disturbing to our sensibilities, may be precisely what our galactic community requires at this juncture in our shared history. Elder Sashin joined them. I second the motion, the ancient Morrigan announced. And I further propose that the Mutual Defense and Development Compact be formally recognized as an official body within the council structure, with Ambassador Reyes as its first director. Elena had not expected this. She and her team had hoped for associate membership and perhaps some acknowledgement of the compact. This was far more than they had anticipated. Elder Tall called for a vote. The results appeared on the giant displays, overwhelmingly in favor of both proposals. Ambassador Reyes, Tall said, would you address the council? Elena walked to the central platform, her mind racing to adjust her prepared remarks to this unexpected outcome. Distinguished members of the Galactic Council, she began, humanity is honored by your decision. We accept full membership with gratitude and humility. She looked around the vast chamber, making eye contact with delegates from dozens of species. But our work is just beginning. The recognition of the extinction pattern is only the first step. Now we must understand its cause and prepare our response. Elena gestured toward the section where the compact members sat. The Mutual Defense and Development Compact was formed to give voice to species that felt overlooked. Now, as an official body within the Council, it will serve a new purpose, to lead our collective preparation efforts. She turned to face the Adjudication Committee. We don't know when the next extinction attempt will come, but for the first time in galactic history, we will not face it divided and hiding. We will face it united and ready. 6 months later, Elena stood at the observation deck of Nexus Station, watching ships from dozens of species conducting joint military exercises. The vessels moved in coordinated patterns, practicing maneuvers that would have been unthinkable under the old council policies. Her aide approached with a data pad. 17 more species have applied to join the compact, he reported. That makes 54 total members now. Elena nodded, still watching the ships. What had begun as humanity's defiant stand against classification had evolved into a galaxy-wide movement. Research teams were now actively investigating the extinction pattern, pooling knowledge that had previously been kept separate. Defense technologies that some species had developed in secret were now being shared and improved upon. A familiar figure joined her at the viewport, High Elder Zox, who had become one of humanity's strongest advocates. An impressive sight, he commented, watching the coordinated fleet exercises. Some council members still call this the end of our peaceful era. Elena shook her head, her gaze fixed on the stars beyond. Not the end of peace, she corrected, the beginning of security, and perhaps for the first time in galactic history the chance to actually earn the peace you've been pretending to have. Zox made a gesture of acknowledgement. You were right, about us hiding. For millennia, the oldest species taught the younger ones to spread thin, to stay quiet, to avoid attracting attention. We called it wisdom. Perhaps it was just fear. Fear isn't wrong, Elena said. It's a natural response to danger. The question is what you do with that fear. Do you hide from it, or do you use it to prepare? A very human perspective, Zox noted. Elena smiled slightly. They called us war-fearing, she reflected, never understanding that acknowledging the possibility of conflict is the first step toward meaningful peace. We don't love war. We just refuse to be blindsided by it. Far beyond, the training fleets in the darkness between stars, something ancient stirred. For millennia, it had culled the galaxy with impunity, eliminating rising civilizations before they could become threats. It had grown accustomed to finding its prey scattered and unprepared. But now, it sensed a change. For the first time, its future prey was preparing to hunt back. The cycle that had repeated for countless millennia was about to be broken, and it had begun with a single human diplomat's furious reply that stunned the universe. The end.